Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going over a few of the recent generic ballot polls and kind of giving my assessment and thoughts of what I think of them, as well as looking back some of the previous elections' generic ballot polls and kind of seeing how we can use those numbers, learn from them, and kind of how we look at these numbers today. So, as we know, the 2022 midterms are coming up. They're about a year and a quarter, a year and a third away. And we're starting to see some generic ballot polls come out now. And it's very important to remember that polls this far out are not always accurate. And we don't want to give our hopes up one way or another, but I think it's important we keep a close look at them and see if there's anything we can really learn from. So I'm on 538 because I think they have more of the generic ballot polls than Real Clear Politics do, although I will be using those for the past generic ballot polls. What they're showing so far is Democrats are leading the generic ballot, not by a lot. They're leading it by a maximum of 4%, unless you do the BC poll, but that's 7%. That's an outlier, definitely. The 4% margin is the biggest margin of victory the Democrats are winning the generic ballot by. Now, this is going into 2022, and I'm skeptical of these polls because 2022, by all regards, is expected to be a big Republican wave year. Now, we don't know how big of a Republican wave year it will be. The early projection so far is that Republicans will either flip back the House or likely get very, very close, but especially flip back the House. The Senate's a little different because there are some retiring Republicans in toss-up states or in Democratic states. So that might be a little different, but the generic and ballot, a lot of people are projecting to be a Republican year. And having Democrats up 4 or up 3 or up 1, what that tells me is 2022 is expected to be a Republican wave year. And I think it will be a Republican wave year. These polls being up 1, 2, or 3 points really don't matter all that much. But what is interesting to keep an eye on is the Democrats get well represented in the polls. Do the Republicans get as represented in polls as good as the Democrats do? Well, for that answer, we have to look back at some of the previous elections. In 2020, the generic ballot polls, the pollings had the Democrats favored by 6.8%. The Democrats' generic ballot ended up winning by 3.1%, so they underestimated Republicans by about 3%. The Democrats, they actually underestimated by about 1%. So the Democrats, they pretty much got right on the head. Republicans, they undervalued by 5%. When you look at 47% compared to 42%, 5% of Republicans either weren't represented or just didn't answer any of the polls. When you look back at 2018, which is more of a Democratic wave year, the polls had the Democrats at 49 and up by 7, where the Democrats actually ended up winning by 8.4, so off by about a point. And then you look back at 2016, Democrats were favored in polls by about 0.6%. Republicans ended up actually winning the congressional ballot by 1.1%. So these polls are very, very hard to get a read of. And generic ballot is one of those things where it's very hard to predict because, yes, it is the generic ballot poll for the whole country, but that doesn't always mean anything. I mean, 2018, here, let's go back, I think it's this one. 2018, the Democrats won the national election by 8.4 points, and they did flip back the House. Republicans also gained in the Senate. So don't think that generic ballot being one way or another is going to impact the Senate race all that much, because it might, but it probably won't. What really matters is, are there any keys we can learn from this? 2020, the most recent election, the Republicans were underpolled by about 5%. Now, you can't just go through and say, well, because they got it wrong in 2020, that means that it'll be wrong for every election forever and ever. We don't know that. Is it safe to assume that maybe Republicans get underrepresented or underpolled by about 1% or 2%? Honestly, I'd say, yeah, that's a pretty fair assumption. A lot of polls and studies show Republicans don't really answer polls in the same regard as, say, Democrats do, so that is something you can safely assume. And whether or not Trump is on the ballot makes a very big difference. When President Trump or former President Trump is on the ballot, Democrats and Republicans both turn out more. In a midterm year, when there'll be a referendum on Joe Biden, I expect Republican turnout to be boosted. And President Trump won't be on the ballot, but he will be out campaigning. So we could see higher turnout, but I would expect it would favor Republicans. So the fact that it's saying Democrats are up 4 now, that doesn't really give too much of an indicator other than the midterms are likely to be close. And say it ends up being an environment where Republicans win the generic ballot by 1, or they win it by 2, or something like that. A Republican winning the generic ballot by 2% could have pretty big ramifications for the House of Representatives, and maybe even the Senate, depending. Again, the Senate's a little bit more of a special case. But if these polls do ring true and the Democrats are up 4, what that means is the Democrats are likely either holding on to the House or losing it by about 5 or 6 seats. And in return, or as regards to the Senate, if the Democrats have a congressional ballot of +4, that probably means Democrats are winning Senate races in Pennsylvania, probably winning in Wisconsin, probably winning in New Hampshire, probably winning in Georgia, definitely winning in Arizona and Nevada, and maybe, just maybe, picking off a seat in North Carolina if the +4 Democrat holds. But I don't think in 2022 it will be a +4 Democratic environment. I think a +1, +2 Republican environment is more likely. But there hasn't been a ton of polling, but as I mentioned, you got to remember the 1 to 2% kind of Republican underrepresentation probably should be factored in. But so far, the generic polls show a very, very close 2022, and definitely something you want to keep an eye on. That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon so you get notified when I post a new video. If you're new to the channel, it's your first time watching my videos, especially make sure you like and subscribe. If you're a returning subscriber of mine, thank you so much for watching again. It means the absolute world to me that you keep coming back, so I appreciate it. And yeah, that'll do it, and I'll see you in the next video.